Can you let me know right now, please? Benita Applebum.
The art of creating a racing game sequel is a simple science, and in the late 90s, gaming developers were going bigger and better. Gran Turismo 2, a game so massive in features that it came packaged in 2 discs, trumped its predecessor by adding over 500 cars and doubling the size of its GT career mode. Others like Colin McRae Rally 2.0, Wipeout 2097, and Ridge Racer Type 4 were better known for refining all the bells and whistles that made the originals sing. Following up on the success of the fantastic Road and Track presents the Need for Speed, Need for Speed 2 on the PlayStation 1 puts the series in a reverse trajectory. It's a strange, confusing offering that ultimately fails to take EA's flagship racing franchise to the next level, but not before causing some headaches along the way. Like its predecessor, Need for Speed 2 has 8 different vehicles with 6 different tracks and a motley crew of event types and race settings to dive right into. Besides a rather comprehensive list of unlockable cars and circuits, you can virtually power on your PlayStation and take your heart rate on an immediate roller coaster ride through the game's scariest courses with iconic hypercars like the Lotus Elise GT1, the McLaren F1, and the cover star, the Ferrari F50. Clearly, the intention was to put players behind the wheel under their own terms, and that immediacy makes Need for Speed 2 an extremely welcoming, woefully customizable experience. Like the first game, you can choose a car, track, and race type. With cars, your opponent will challenge you in, and whether or not you want to race a whole field of opponents or just go toe-to-toe in a head-to-head showdown with or without traffic. There are still numerous track records to smash, and beating the game's more structured game modes still awards you with a new track, another eye-popping visual spectacle you'll be truly happy you fought for. It's also worth noting that this is the first Need for Speed where you can change your car's color, although it's probably best to refrain from mixing and matching too much in that regard. Subtle changes and additions come in the form of the game's tournament mode and brand new knockout mode. Instead of the fixed conditions of the first game's tournament events where you were limited to a single class of vehicles, Need for Speed allows you to pick whatever car you want and race it anywhere, with the competition tied specifically to that car class. As the only truly new feature in this ambitious sequel, the knockout stages stand out the most, testing both your mettle and your track experience by throwing the entire game's track list at you under the prefix that you either avoid last place entirely or face elimination. These races are the best way to play Need for Speed 2 in short bursts, as you get to tour the world in your favorite car while doing everything it takes to come out on top once the smell of burnt rubber fades in the distance. With this addition came one unfortunate omission, however, as the police are totally non-existent in Need for Speed 2, regardless of how you play it. Nevertheless, no race is the same in Need for Speed 2, and given the aforementioned variety, it's hard to lose interest in its arcade-style trappings. A speedway in Norway offers bountiful opportunities to test out your car's high speed as you zip through the crowd. A soothing Mediterranean backdrop descends into a thrilling mad dash loaded with wide banks and thrilling jumps about the narrow neighborhood streets. There's even a theme park-inspired tour through Northern Europe as you dip, dive, and swerve through a castle, a forest, and a highway tunnel. You cannot discount the imagination and creativity in the game's track design, with each course humbling you with new surprises. You probably also can't imagine how much fun they are to drive in, once you spend a few laps memorizing them, of course. Despite the lack of those breezy, road trip-style, point-to-point segments from the original, I'd go as far as saying that Need for Speed 2 features one of the most fun, dynamic, and challenging track lists in the series' history. Unfortunately, everything falls apart the minute you're behind the wheel. Need for Speed 2 on the PlayStation 1 is a travesty of a driving experience. Although Pioneer Productions shifted the focus on physics to adhere to a more accessible, juvenile style of driving, the results are catastrophically bad. More often than not, the brakes are your own worst enemy, constantly putting your car in an instant power slide with both an immediate speed decrease and severe loss of control. Like a magnet, any vehicle you're driving will virtually pull itself towards the edges of the track, sending you flying into walls and yielding any momentum you may have had on corner entry. In the first game, I was only punished from trying to knife through hairpins without initially slowing down. Here, Any slight input that pivots the car horizontally will transform it into a hoonigan drifter on ice, and since the game hardly believes in proper counter-steering, I was constantly trapped in these uncontrollable skids until I brought the car to a screeching halt. In addition, the cars themselves lack a consistent center of gravity. The tracks in Need for Speed 2 feature numerous jumps and elevation changes, but these rides don't have enough traction or suspension to take on any of them confidently. Sometimes you'll get off scot-free when you take to the skies, and other times, the car will flip over uncharacteristically when the front half sticks out facing the road just a teensy bit, and that's something that happens even when it lands on all fours. There's nothing you can do to alleviate these problems. You can customize the steering and throttle inputs, and even try to go nostalgic and switch things up with the simulation handling model, but both options only make matters worse. Speaking of only making matters worse, Need for Speed 2's racing incessantly descends into an exercise in insanity. Oftentimes, you'll randomly drive over an invisible bump that'll send you flying into oblivion, and in other cases, any direct contact with the wall at negligible speeds leads to these exaggerated crashes that seem unavoidable. When you're literally not driving on the actual road in this game, you're probably under the mercy of its terrible texture popping and collision detection. This also extends towards the AI, a ruthless, bloodthirsty unit that will come for your head at all costs. They're absolutely malevolent, ramming you into walls or into multiple car pileups at will, and zigzagging wildly on straightaways and wide banks so that you're forced to collide with them. They transcend the ugliest moments in Need for Speed 2 and make your play experience something as cynical as a Forza Motorsports online hopper. It's honestly not all bad. The game does have a strong, nerve-wracking sense of speed that makes power courses like Proving Grounds and Outback a perpetual joy to experience. And with time, it is possible to get by with some of the game's helpful, albeit bewildering, handling quirks like foregoing the brakes entirely and simply letting off the throttle on corners and jumps for a smoother, more predictable ride. These things make Need for Speed 2 a playable game at best, and considering how mouth-watering its feature set is with the fantastic car list and the addictive race types, that's all the title needs to be worth it in a sense, but its weird relationship between imaginary courses and a Jekyll and Hyde physics engine that's not really sure whether it wants to be arcade or some kind of simulation will absolutely be off-putting for most and rage-inducing for everyone else. Need for Speed 2 is an absolute winner from a presentation standpoint. 21 years to the day, it still looks pretty decent. Compared to the first game, the bump in polygons for the vehicles is hugely apparent, and the accuracy and pioneered productions replicating each playable car from their real-life counterparts is really impressive. The cars in this game are always visually arresting, especially when you lose control and send it tumbling down in an endless spiral of debris. Considering that this is still the latest non-sim based Need for Speed game to offer cockpit views, the dashboards in Need for Speed 2 have become a bit of a novelty, and a large part of that is because they look so damn good. The dials on the speedometer move according to how hard you're accelerating, and unlike the first game, you'll see the manufacturer logo crested across the steering wheel for a more authentic look. In addition, how many other video games let you drive the Ford GT90 from a totally realized cabin perspective, let alone at all? Not only are the tracks in Need for Speed 2 a blast to drive on, regarded that you can overcome the physics of course, they look sensational for 1997 standards and are littered with distinct background vistas as distracting as the chaos on the road. In addition, the game characterizes the courses with a soundtrack tailored to each one, a nice touch that provides a pleasing aesthetic to every race. Although the menus are ugly and dated, the game treats you to a wealth of car showcases that dive deep under the hood and offer comprehensive specs and history bits, all of which are capped off by another slew of provocative FMV videos. These were staples in the first Need for Speed thanks to the Road and Track license, and you'll be very happy to have them here too. Need for Speed 2 has the cars, the looks, and the goods to be a great racing game, but it fails miserably at translating that level of quality on the track. It's a wildly disappointing video game experience, with the potential seeping from virtually every aspect of design. There is decent fun to have with all the cheat codes and unlockables that make Need for Speed 2 a neat little nostalgia trip, but since it's such a maddeningly frustrating exercise in driving, I simply cannot recommend most of you to hop in the time capsule for this one.